All right. Welcome in to another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. Tonight is episode 185. We're going streaking because your Kings are on a hot streak right now. That's what we're going to be talking about the last couple games. What is making this team different? Perhaps a little tinfoil hat segment. So get in the chat, like, and subscribe, and you know what to do. Let's go. As always, that intro is brought to you by Ezera. Their new song Blind out now, wherever you listen to music. So go give that a little listen for the band. Joe, we're about to give the fans a little listen tonight with maybe some questions. Put some tweets earlier about the team, how they're feeling about the team. So we'll get that into the third period here. But in the first period, before we get started, I want to see how you're doing, my man. How's it going?
Still not over Juan Soto, not signing with the Yankees, but it's going to be a process, Brandon. It's going to be a process for me to get through that. This will be harder than getting over the World Series.
Which I don't understand because that was your first World Series in a long time.
Yeah,
I know we were talking about it before the break and everything, or before the intro. Losing him to a rival. And I guess I could understand that. It'd be like Kopitar, maybe not Kopitar because he wasn't a long-time Yankee, but a big free agent that you guys were trying to get going to a rival, and the rival that you've always been the big brother to.
Yes,
right. It'd be like somebody going to the Ducks. We've beaten up on the Ducks over the last decade. It'd be like somebody going to the Ducks and then making them better. So I kind of get that. I guess losing the World Series would kind of chat me a little bit longer, but maybe not because you have 15 years to get over this because you're going to see him all the time across the way there. But for all of our fans in the chat, please hit that like button. It helps us get our algorithms going. Get in the chat. Let's see. I want to see that chat moving. Gwendolyn, hey guys, hang in there, Joe. We'll give you some condolences there.
Thanks,
so, get in the chat. Let's get this chat fired up. Let's get it going because we're going to be doing a third period where we're answering your questions and getting into the fans. But before that, Kings stay hot, Joe. The amalgamation that is the Kings, the enigma that is the Kings, I still don't understand. But I'm here for the wins. I'm here for the points. And they get a couple more. Right now, they are second in the standings. Keep pace with Vegas, a little bit outpacing them, but we're right there. 37 points, if I remember correctly. Team looking good. What did you think about the last two games for your LA Kings?
I thought the Minnesota game was much more impressive. The Islanders are not a good hockey team. Take nothing away. The Kings did what they had to do, right? They controlled the game in pretty much every facet. I didn't love the third period. To be honest with you, like the Islanders very well could have and probably should have tied that game. And that, that's a bit of an issue if you let a team like that hang around, and the Kings could have put them away a lot sooner. But they did what they had to do against a team that they're just much better than. But I was very impressed with how LA started that game, considering it was the first game, on a pretty lengthy road trip, and they come out and just out attempt the Islanders 23-6. The shots at 5-on-5 that period, Brandon, were 12-1 in favor of the Kings, 8-1 in high danger chances. This is all natural static, like just really, really impressive and dominant performance in that first period against the Islanders. But again, I'm somebody that's not, I don't think very highly of the Islanders. So credit to the Kings for taking care of business. But Minnesota's that team's for real. Like that's a really good hockey team, and LA just did what they do. They just stymied them. They could not get anything going against the Kings with any sort of consistency. LA held the Wild to 4 high danger chances against, according to Natural Stat Trick. So, man, oh man, just what's the way they've been doing it is with their dominant 5-on-5 play, particularly on the defensive side of things, and that showed these last 2 games. Really, if you look at it, they scored 3 even strength goals in the last 2 games in what was dominant performances, but it was enough to win the game. So. They're doing it the way they've been doing it in terms of like stylistically structure and 5-on-5 play.
Oliver coming in here. Hey guys, Joe might be the proud owner of an Edmonton jersey by the end of the season. Haha. And Gwen coming to your defense. Easy on Joe. He's greedy. Like no poking the bear there. Yeah. I really think, the last couple of games and really over the stretch here, the horses have come to play. I mean, Kopitar has been playing all season, but he's continued looking good. And Kempe, as Kempe does every once in a while, has a little more juice in the juice box and is scoring at a pretty rapid rate. So I'm liking the top line as of late, and that was no exception in these last 2 games. They were playing really well.
Yeah, and I got to say, Kevin Fiala and his game against the Islanders, the last 2 games in particular. So, Randon, against Minnesota, Kevin Fiala with 7 shot attempts, 8 shot assists for 15 shot contributions at 5-on-5. And then he follows it up on Long Island with 7 more shot attempts, 5 shot assists for 12 shot contributions. I mean, he has been – that game against the Islanders was like, that's the Kevin Fiala that we want to see. And, hey, credit to Jim Hiller, who – he's rolling with a lot of the 11 forward, 7 defenseman look of late. And there's no better way to, as we like to say, let Kev be Kev than just feed him ice time in that 11 and 7 mix up, get him as much power play time as he can handle. I mean, that's how you do it. You have one. I shouldn't say one, but he is your biggest game breaker. You could make a case for obviously Adrian Kempe, but the way Fiala can create for himself and create for others, like he's a unicorn on this team. And so giving him and feeding him the ice time, and then you're seeing the way he's played lately. Outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Kev that we need, and obviously this is the highest level that this is his A+ game right now. And you can't always have an A+ game, but he wasn't even given a C game in a couple of these weeks, So it's good to see him show that apex of what's going on, and I like the team giving him the Ovechkin treatment, just for the power play to stay out there for two full minutes, and get something working. And so, as Ralph was saying here, Kev is played power play 1 and 2 is a genius move by Hiller. Mm-hmm. Playing to people's strengths, we've been saying it all year. And, ever since we've had the podcast, is coaches' jobs are getting people to play his strengths. Kevin's not a defensive stalwart. Get him the puck, let him create, let him do that kind of stuff. And so I like the fact that he made that adjustment on the power play. Even though the power play percentage went up over the last week, our ranking went down, which I'll take it. But we're at 28th in the league at 16.7% there. So as long as they keep inching up, I think this team is so dominant 5-on-5, Joe. Like if we keep inching up to maybe a top, I'd take top 20, a top 20 power play.
Point,
yeah. You know what I mean? And just kind of get to that hovering around that 18 to 20% maybe. This team would be a lot more dangerous there. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota, that's a statement game. You're playing against a team that is above you in the standings, and you have a chance to play in the playoffs and looked quite dominant against them. And then, you're supposed to handle the teams that you're better than them. But not only that, it's a statement game because it's the first game of the road trip.
Yep.
Getting the tone right for what this trip needs to be in New York. And so I like that. Each game meant something a little bit different, and the Kings handled business both times.
Yeah, and well said, because they're a much better team than the Islanders, but it'd be very understandable to write that game off as it was a schedule type of loss, because you're coming off 5 wins in a row. It's your first game on an Eastern swing, a lengthy Eastern swing. You could totally understand if they came out flat or they end up losing that game. And it was just the exact opposite. They came out absolutely buzzing. And it was awesome. They lived in the Islander zone that first period. So that was great to see. And it's like, this team just they're not stopping right now. They're just a buzzsaw when it comes to 5-on-5 play. It's been great.
And that's what this team is going to have to live on. I mean, that's what they brought. The players they brought in to do weren't power play merchants or anything like that. So the players they brought in, were for intensity and to help the 5-on-5 drive, which the team was already good at that. But it just kind of emphasized an already a good strength for the team. So I've been liking the way the team has been playing. I think this road trip, if we look at it real quick, is a pretty good one. A good test over the weekend with New Jersey, and New York's kind of on fire right now, but they have a good team on paper. Penguins off and on. Flyers were last in the league, but now they've caught up. Predators are good on paper. Capitals are bad on paper, but good on the ice. Like, I don't know what's going on there either. So it's going to be interesting there. And you're looking at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 games in 2 weeks, essentially, or a little less than 2 weeks. So definitely going to be putting some pressure on those legs for this team. But the only good thing is I see one back-to-back, and that ends the road trip.
Yeah, I'll say, there was a stretch where this recent stretch, actually, heading into this kind of recent stretch, people were like, well, this would be schedule's going to get tougher, so we'll see how this goes. And they kind of answered that bell with knocking off Winnipeg, Dallas, Minnesota. Ottawa was in there. So they handled that fine, and now you're heading into a stretch where not a whole lot of impressive teams upcoming. So again, it's easy to kind of fall in and maybe get lulled to sleep a little bit, and all of a sudden you could go, what was this, a 7-game road trip? You find yourself going 2-5 on a road trip that you should have done better on. But again, you said started off with a bang against the Islanders, so they're not even allowing that to creep in with how well they played against the Islanders.
Yeah, it's a good tone-setting game, and New Jersey probably the best team in this road swing. And so they play them tomorrow night. So a very good chance to get off to a hot start for this road trip until they hit the buzzsaw that is Jonathan Quick on Saturday, right?
Hey, the Rangers, what a mess they are. They did pick up a win today in Buffalo for whatever that's worth, but that's a team that's kind of a mess right now too.
So I want to kind of maybe hit some brights. Obviously, the team has been a bright spot as a whole. But in the last 2 games, has there been any other bright spot for you as far as maybe a player or something that you saw that you kind of want to highlight?
I mean, certainly the biggest one for me is the play of Kevin Fiala. I know I said it earlier, and I mentioned, his shot contributions these first 2 games. I think he has just been – this is the player that we've kind of been waiting for, and we haven't seen it consistently enough for whatever reason, but it just hasn't been there. I'll say again, I mean, it's kind of boring, but Kopitar just continues to play really well. I thought he had a strong game against the Islanders. So he's continuing to play well. Laferriere with the power play goal against, I think he scored a power play goal into Minnesota, which again was big. So Fiala moves to that, is playing on both power play units, and he sets up Laferriere, who after his little mini slump has picked back up and scoring. It's nice to see him score on the power play. Pretty much all of his damage had been done, has been at 5-on-5. So it's nice to see him chip in on the power play. Dano with a great screen on that one. So honestly, like from an individual standpoint, those are a few. I thought Mikey Anderson's been rock solid defensively. So yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of like wow individually, just because the team isn't scoring, right? It's not as if they're dominating play at 5-on-5.
I mean, seven goals in 2 games is not bad.
Well, yeah, you consider 3 of those are empty netters.
Okay.
I know they count.
I didn't want you to poke flaws in my argument there, Joe.
Well, if you look and again, empty netters, it's not as if they don't count. I acknowledge that, but like when you're looking at through the run of play, they're averaging basically 2 goals a game at 5-on-5. even during this 6-game winning streak. So this is still not a team that's scary offensively, but they just lock you down on the defensive side of things. They're not giving anything up. To tell you that a team is scoring 2 goals a game at 5-on-5 over a 6-game stretch, you probably would be stunned to hear that they've won 6 straight. But this is the Kings. This is how they win, and they're playing it perfectly right now. You got to give them credit. I mean, Jim Hiller, you have to give Jim Hiller a ton of credit. Like this team is bought into the structure. They've bought into a work ethic. They're aggressive in the neutral zone with their steps, and making life difficult on the opponents. And they're doing a great job at limiting, dangerous chances in the defensive zone. So it hasn't mattered the fact that they're not scoring a ton because they're not giving up anything.
I like this comment here by Aaron. Always a jokester in the chat here. Joe's the type of guy who, when he wins the lotto, is mad about having to pay taxes.
It's funny. So I was talking as the assistant coach of the team I coach, I was talking to the head coach last week because there's times where I'll clip video from games. I'll watch the game and clip certain things. And as a coach, I always find it afterwards. I'm like, the quote unquote negative clips outweigh the positive ones. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that we played poorly necessarily. It's just my brain is like, okay, where can we fix things? Like I'll also point out things that we did well, things that here's what we're trying to do. And we did it. And look what happened. It's great result. Great job. Great shift. But there's it's probably 3-1 where I'm looking at, hey, we could have done this here. Look at this clip, or we should have remember what we're trying to do in this scenario. I guess that's just the nature of I'm always trying to like see where there's I guess improvement that can be made. I don't know, Brandon.
Well, I think I noticed it in both games, and I just looked up the percentages. I thought that Kings have been good in the faceoff dot recently, and I know you're not a huge proponent of that, but it allows the Kings to start with the puck more often than not. And so both over 50% in both of those games. I don't know what the percentage is on the year, but just watching the game, I kind of noticed it. It was kind of like a gut feeling, like, okay, they're kind of winning a lot of faceoffs here, and it seemed like they were winning important faceoffs, either on the PK or on the on the power play, to where they were getting the puck when it was necessary. So I don't know if that's an anomaly or if that's just something I noticed in the last 2 games, but I thought it was worth pointing out. Yeah,
and listen, I mean, the thing with faceoffs for me is listen, as a player, I was I was a centerman, so I very much am a believer in faceoffs. I guess where it gets a little dicey for me is I don't want to lean on it too much, because what faceoffs are not is they're not predictive. But just because you win more faceoffs does not mean that you're a winning team. That they don't correlate at all. Now, that said, clearly there are situational faceoffs which are huge, right? Late in games, final minute of a period, D-zone faceoff, penalty kill, power play. Like, obviously there are certainly situational faceoffs. It's just on the whole, and you want individually to know who's doing well and who's not doing well, because if you do have one of those big situational faceoffs, you're going to want the guy that's doing the best taking that faceoff. But where I come out on faceoffs is I want to be careful the way people talk about it, because there's no correlation to being a good faceoff team equals being a good possession team, or being a good faceoff team equals being a successful team. There's just nothing there. So that's all. I do think faceoffs are important. It's just I don't think they're predictive, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I just think a good team that is clutch team has a guy or guys that are able to take those quality faceoffs.
Sure. And the Kings do, right? Obviously, Kopitar and Danault are 2 very good guys at the dot.
I think that's a good thing there, and I like Laffy, like you said, mentioned him. Gwen mentioned Tuna in the chat. Marvara has just been consistent throughout this whole streak there, and now it's like, not that I don't want Doughty to come back. It's like then he's the one that's going to get clipped when it does happen.
Well, I'll say, I'm glad you brought that up, because we did talk about that, I feel, at some point, but the team did just send Caleb Jones down. right? They put him on waivers to send him down to Ontario, which is interesting to me because that clearly means that they say, okay, well, they put Mulverari in ahead of Jones, ahead of Burrows, ahead of England, and they've then sent one of them down.
Yeah.
So, clearly Mulverari is moving up the pecking order, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point though, when I don't know, like I still lean Mulverari because that's just what the Kings do. I have no reason to think otherwise. It would be too LA for them to just not send Mulverari down, and when Doughty comes back and just sit there with England and Burrows, which wouldn't make any sense. But I don't know, man. The Caleb Jones thing is interesting. That maybe it isn't going to be Mulverari. Maybe it's going to be, an England or a Burrows. But the thing is they might look at this as if Doughty's back, that probably, if it doesn't push Mulverari down to Ontario, it pushes him out of the lineup. And do they want him sitting there as a 7, not playing, if they're going to go back to 6D? Or would they rather have him playing in Ontario and keeping fresh for when they need him?
I mean, he's not a developmental prospect anymore. Like, he is what he is, I think, at this point. Like, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head if he has any more options left to go down, or if he would have to pass through waivers.
Oh, he has to go through waivers for sure. Yeah.
So then
he always clears.
Are you? Yeah, but now because now he's going to play the way he's playing now. He's probably going to play a full month and a half. Where before he was playing 3 games or 4 games, not enough big enough sample size to really put the leagues on notice. But you couldn't tell me that over half the teams in this league couldn't use a Rivera, especially for his salary cap. So, like, would playing for a full 2 months, the Kings are on a hot streak, which means they're getting more national attention. Like, Don't you think that would like up his value? Maybe it ups his value at the trade deadline to get some assets out of him since he's on a 1-year contract. Like, do the Kings do that knowing that they might need him in the playoffs? Or is it finally something along the lines of, hey, Andres England only has 1 year left on his contract. We can afford to send him down. We signed Burrows. Is it 1 year or 2 year for Burrows? Do we sign?
That was a trade. I want to say he's got 1 year left, but I'll check that.
Anyways, so I mean, I think he has a better chance to play himself into a consistent spot, and with a full probably month to a month and a half left before Doughty comes back.
Well, and now they're on the East Coast, so you mentioned the national attention. There'll be people that actually watch the Kings again now that they're on the East Coast, so they'll get a chance to watch Mulverari. And you're right. I mean, he is playing really, really well, and just looking at natural stat trick and on ice expected goals percentage, expected goal share, he's among the tops in the NHL, just in his short time in terms of of players that have played at least 100 minutes. He is, I think he's in the top 10. He's fifth. He's fifth in the NHL of players that have played 100 minutes in expected goals for percentage. He's the number 1 defenseman in the NHL in that stat. The other players ahead of him are all forwards. He's been outstanding.
Yeah. And if we didn't have a guy that we're paying $3.85 million, he probably would have earned a consistent spot.
Kings could have easily saved some money and put that toward, another forward that they needed more than a
maybe a name that we're going to talk about later in some sort of segment where I don a hat for all the people in the public. So yeah, I think this team is I think people are stepping up. I think a lot of the stars are stepping up now. Fiala's stepping up. The team's constantly playing well 5-on-5. The special teams, say what it will, it's not great, but they are getting better. Both the percentages have went up during the hot streak, and they both went up since the last podcast by even small amounts, but they've gone up. And so they've been more consistent in that factor as well.
This goes back to a little bit of what I said last show, where it's like, it almost doesn't matter to me what the Kings do in the regular season. Like, if you show me you can get past the first round, and then I'll start to get excited. And same thing with the power play. Like, they're so dominant at 5-on-5. They're going to be perfectly fine. They're going to make playoffs. Whether they finish second, third, or a wild card, we'll see. But I feel they should be a playoff team. Like, I know last year they had that horrible stretch that started about right now with what they went winless in like 14 games or something. That's not going to happen. That was a fluke last year. It's not going to happen this year. Yeah, they'll go on a stretch at some point where it's like they're like 2-6 or whatever. Every team goes through it, but they've banked enough points. They're too good at 5-on-5 to where they've just got to. And I say this as if it's easy, but they need their power play in April. Like, not to say they don't need to win games now, and what I mean is, like, it's going to matter come playoff time, because as we've talked about, this isn't a team that scores a lot of goals. They don't score a lot at 5-on-5. They're going to need every power play opportunity they can get to score goals in playoffs. So it would be nice if it can start to chip in at that time. So yeah, the power play, I think whatever they've got to do to play around with the personnel, play around with the system, tweak what they have to figure out what is going to work as it goes along. Because what it has not been working the first few months of the season, they've got a couple of months to figure that out. So and obviously with Doughty's return imminent at some point here, like, there's things that are going to continue to change. So I'm not all that concerned. Like, I'm concerned in the sense that
I just want it to get up to a more consistent level. Like, could we just be top 20? And then if you're a top 20 team consistently, and then you get spikes that are like a couple of weeks that are spike up to 25% or 28% because your team is hot, and hopefully it spikes in the playoffs. I do think it's important to get to at least 20% by the end of the regular season, because then, then your team, you're almost declining penalties at that point, But I say that, and we were a top 5 penalty kill last year, and we looked absolutely dog water in the playoffs. So,
I mean, Edmonton will do that.
Hey, they're a team that should not be named on this podcast. So before I get going to the next segment here, we have a lovely word from one of our sponsors, and that's going to be DraftKings. So if anybody wants to make a little extra money for the holiday season, DraftKings is here to help you out. The 24-25 season still has a new car smell, and the action is heating up at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started with DraftKings Sportsbook. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. And if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Now, Joe, I'm looking at the odds here, and I'm seeing like over/under for tomorrow's games 5.5. Obviously the Kings are about 2 to 3 goal team. New Jersey can get there. Maybe you want to smash that over. Maybe you think the Kings are playing so well right now, they're going to lock them down and you're going to hit that under. Now, odds are subject to change, but you can click on DraftKings at any time and see about trying to get the best odds for your bet. So download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you just bet $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-97777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill and Casino in Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win in order to receive reward. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, see dkng.co/ice. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved. Well, Joseph, that swings us right into our next topic here, which is going to be coast to coast. Talking about some other teams around the NHL, as well as maybe some trades that have went on, teams that are struggling, teams that are going well. What is the plate? That is the meal that is the NHL around the LA Kings. Joe, let's get started with the big trade. They traded into the Pacific. Trouba leaving New York, going to Anaheim. What do we think about that trade? Was it necessary for the Rangers to shake things up? Does it really not even matter? How do you kind of feel about that?
I think it was a really, really good move by the New York Rangers. I think that I don't think Trouba is an $8 million player. I don't think he's very good. And I think it was obviously they tried to move him in the offseason. He was not willing to waive his no trade clause. at the time. So, they said, okay, they went into the season, and they said, listen, it's the same thing. We're still trying to move on. We're still trying to shake this up. And I think it's the right move, because I don't think he's a defenseman that is all that impactful these days. And I think it really opens up some money for them to really get creative here as we approach kind of the second half of the season. This is a team that's really struggling. Like, they're in a tough spot. Like, Zibanejad is totally fallen off. Kreider is getting up there a little bit. He's not the player that he once was. And Adam Fox has been good, but I don't think he's been the Adam Fox that people would have maybe expected. So I think it's great for the Rangers. As far as the Ducks go, I don't know. I mean, that team is a mess. They've got, it's one more year, I think, after this one for Trouba, so it's not like it's a long-term commitment. It's not as if they paid a ton to get him. He adds a bit of, whatever, he's a less good Radko Gudas. So fine. I guess for that locker room, they get a veteran, a leader type of thing. I guess that's fine. But that team is a disaster right now in Anaheim. So I don't think it moves the needle for them at all. They should probably look behind the bench to make a move there. I still think there's enough talent on that team to be better than they are. But so I don't think the trade for Anaheim moves the needle at all, but I think it's really good for the Rangers.
Maybe it helps with the locker room. I know that all the words out of that locker room is pretty horrible, and maybe you get another guy like Trouba who is used to talking to head coaches and everything like that, and kind of deflecting the room. It's been in not just with our team, but with other teams. There are players who take a lot of heat from the head coaches and help shield, the locker room. And right now there is a lot of heat coming from the head coach and to the head coach in that organization. So maybe he can kind of filter that out now. To what extent, who knows? On the ice, it's who cares at that point? Like, what is he, as far as his skill set? But maybe the locker room. I mean, because they have enough skill on that team to get some things moving. Maybe the locker room just kind of needs that. There, I feel like Anaheim maybe could have got more value with his contract, and what they took on.
Yeah, you wonder if there's a deadline move still to come there. I mean, who knows? There's GMs will salivate over a guy like Trouba, right? So
yeah,
especially at the deadline.
So maybe you say they trade for him and then they eat like $3 million of his contract.
Right, maybe they eat some money
return.
at the deadline. I mean, that's a possibility. It's a possibility. You're right. I would agree that if they could have, but I think Drury was pretty adamant that like they weren't eating a dime. So that was like first and foremost, they weren't going to do it. I don't know this, but it sounded like they weren't going to do a deal unless they could get rid of it altogether. So if I'm Anaheim, take it on for now. And then maybe have an opportunity to eat some, and who knows, maybe they move him at the deadline this year or over the summer. Also, that's I guess that's possible too. But the Rangers, I mean, I think that's great for them because I think they can replace what he brings pretty easily, whether it's at the deadline. I don't think that's an issue. And while it doesn't affect this year, they quickly turned around and signed Igor Shesterkin to a long-term deal at $11.5 million. So they got that locked up and done. They at least don't have to worry about it anymore, and they can move on from that. So all in all, I think it's better for the Rangers. What it actually means for the Rangers, I don't know. They're that's not a team that's going deep in playoffs unless Igor Shesterkin just takes them there, because they're not good enough. But they at least have opened up a little bit of financial flexibility to get creative as we approach the trade deadline.
Well, two teams right here are I kind of want to talk about, and in both kind of wonderment here. Buffalo Sabres lose again. I think they're 2-5-3. Can't seem to buy a win. Losing right now. I know that's kind of close to your heart over there in Buffalo. What is going on with this team? This team can't seem to get any sort of consistent play, no matter how much talent they have on that roster.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. They've now lost 8 games in a row. And a couple of those games they had leads in. They were leading against Colorado. They were leading against, I forget who else now, but they were leading against Detroit just the other day. Ended up losing that game in a shootout. What's things that are not going well, and these are contracts that I praised when they signed them, like Dylan Cousins. They locked up a couple years ago. It's what they were the team or a team that was at the forefront of signing these guys early, before they'd really popped off. And I think Tage Thompson, I think that's going to be fine. I don't think there's any issues there. Dylan Cousins is not having a great season right now for the Sabres. And, he's someone that was signed to 7.1. It's not like a detrimental contract because I still think he can live up to that. But he's struggling. Rasmus Dahlin being hurt lately has not helped. But these problems started before that. Matthias Samuelsson is signed to kind of similar to like a Mikey Anderson deal. He was signed shortly before. I think Mikey's like 4.2 times about 8 years as a big defensive defenseman who is like a much more my type of defensive defenseman where he can move around a little bit. He can move a puck. He's not playing well right now though. So that's not going well either. Owen Power is not playing, I think, to the level that they would have hoped by now. This team's a mess. And their GM just gave a press conference the other day, and I don't know how many folks out here, in LA Kingsland caught much of this, but Kevin Adams, and I don't know how much of this is on him, to be honest with you. So he's talking about how we don't have palm trees because nobody wants to go to Buffalo, right? Nobody, free agents don't want to go to Buffalo. Players don't want to waive to go to Buffalo. So he talks about how they don't have palm trees. They have taxes in New York, and that is getting absolutely shredded in Western New York here. That is not playing well. But, to me, it goes back to the owners, the Pagulas. The Sabres came into this season, a team that was talking about playoffs, how they're going to make playoffs. They came into the season like $7 million under the cap. What playoff team is not spending to the cap? The Sabres over the last, I forget if it's 10 years or 15 years, have only once been in the top 10 in terms of player salary. They don't spend any money. They don't spend money. They don't spend to the cap. And I think it's the owner that's saying that there's an internal cap that isn't made public right now, because it's every single year this team does not spend to the salary cap. And while for a couple of years when they were in the build, you can maybe understand it, but these last couple of seasons where we've talked about playoffs in Buffalo, that isn't happening. And I think that you got to at some point look squarely at the owners, because they've had multiple GMs not spend to the cap. That's a little weird if you're asking me. So I think the owners are putting them in a tough spot, and it's just it's a mess right now. There's a number of different things. A number of different things that are going on right now, and it's not good. It's not, because now they're right back toward the bottom of the standings yet again. They're 7th in the Eastern Conference, and they're only 1 point up on Montreal. It's in the Atlantic Division, I should say. No, that's also the Eastern Conference. It's bad.
I know all too well about how owners can be detrimental. So A's only spending money because they're required to by the MLB this year. So I mean, I can understand that, and maybe there is a quiet cap. It's kind of weird how I never understand how billionaires who buy teams don't want to spend money to make your product good.
Obviously the Bills are going all right, and he owns the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So we'll see there. And a team that I don't understand how they keep winning is the Capitals, on top of their division. Joe, still winning without Ovechkin, who was tearing it up with the goal scoring. How are they winning games over there?
This team's not bad. So they were one of the worst teams I've ever seen last year. But if you look at what they brought in the offseason, they brought in a ton of guys that, maybe individually are not great or not guys that you would think of, but on the whole, when you put them all together, like, this is a team that's 7th in the NHL right now. according to Natural Stat Trick, in expected goals share at 5-on-5. And you look at some of the guys that they brought in this past offseason, 2 from your Los Angeles Kings in PL Dubois, who is having a strong season overall, not necessarily, production wise. He's not having a big production season, I would say, but he's definitely playing a much better game and a much harder game in Washington than he did in LA. They bring in Andrew Mangiapane. Dylan Strome has been really good. They acquired Lars Eller this offseason. Then you look on the back end, they brought in Matt Roy. They brought in Jacob Chikrin. You know how much of a fan I've been of Rasmus Sandin, who came over actually the deadline before last season on a trade from Toronto. He's been excellent this year. They're getting good goaltending from Logan Thompson. His teams are they're a good team. I don't think they're a team that's, I think they're first in the division right now. They're not better than New Jersey. They're not better than Carolina, but they might be third in the division. They're better than the Rangers, I would say right now, which is crazy for me to think. But I can't see a team in that division other than Carolina and New Jersey that I think is better than Washington. I think Carolina and New Jersey will surpass them and Washington will drop to third. But that said, this is a way better Washington team than we saw last year because they added a bunch of guys that are just solid hockey players, right? And then you look at Connor McMichael as having a really nice kind of breakout season here. So you put all that together and you got something here. You're cooking with something.
You like to be cooking with grease, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I prefer olive oil.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I think it's the sum of the parts are greater than the individual pieces, and they're just kind of playing. They're playing good complementary hockey, and sometimes you just need to have the parts fit perfectly in order to play well. Where you look at the teams like we just mentioned, the Ducks and Buffalo, they have all the talent in the world, but they're not playing well together.
Yeah, I mean, look at they've kind of done a pretty quick. I'm not going to call it a rebuild. Maybe it's a retool because they didn't. John Carlson's still there. Obviously, Ovechkin's still there. They didn't trade Tom Wilson, so they've still got some pieces that they could have, in theory, moved out that they didn't. And we've talked about this before. People that want to blow it up at your own risk because, again, I've said it before. Look at Chicago. Look at Buffalo. Look at these teams are so long, so far away. Crazy.
Well, I think that'll do it here for that episode of Coast to Coast, where we talk about the rest of the league outside your Los Angeles Kings. Now it's time to get into the meat here, which is the kind of how this team what has been different over the last 6 days. I threw that question out to you guys on Twitter last night. I said, I still don't understand how the Kings team is the hottest team in all of hockey. And I didn't really think I was going to get much interaction with that, but quite a few people chimed in. So I was kind of looking to see maybe what the fans were thinking, Joe, and kind of what we would maybe see, outside of the pulse of hockey royalty, what's going on. And this has to be one of the biggest ones, and multiple people have said it. And the first one on was HBLA Kings fan said the team has adapted to the players and the systems and they bought in. Part of what the old timers were trying to get people to understand earlier in the year, when people were freaking out, we still do need offense though, but the team is bought into the system. And now what you said, Joe, in the 2 games, you kind of said the same thing and mentioned that the new system maybe being the 1-2-2 or, playing a grittier, harder game, being harder to play against, having more of that physical nature, not necessarily in the fighting, but just kind of being more of a pest to play against. Have the Kings bought into the system more over this last 6 games, in your opinion?
I don't know if they've bought in more over the last 6 games. I just think they've bought in general. This is a team that they're going to prioritize checking first. And when I say checking, I don't always mean running,
savings and checking,
throwing a body into a guy. stick checking, just being in opponents' faces, like you watch in the neutral zone. So, we've seen for years where the Kings were a sit back, and then as the team would approach the Kings blue line, that's when they would, their lefty, especially, or whoever, would make their step and force the dump. The Kings are being way more aggressive, I think, in the neutral zone, even above that, like much more toward the red line. Their D are stepping. They're just getting a ton of buy-in from their forwards. It's relentless in 200 feet of the ice. And they're just constantly checking, and they're really hard to play against right now. So I totally agree with the idea that this team has bought into a style of play, because I think that's exactly what it is. You can have a tweak in a system, but for a team that clearly wants to play with a structure, that clearly wants to play with a check first mindset, you have to have the buy-in from players to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And they very much do. And they wouldn't be succeeding without that. But Hiller's got them buying in, and they're believing. And it helps when you're winning games, and they've won 6 in a row. So there's a belief now that what they're doing is working, and it can work, and it will work as long as they stick to it. I think that's a big part of it, is the buy-in to the way Jim Hiller wants to play.
I've been saying that this team, that's the way they have to win games for a long period of time, and they have to be the checking team. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, not every team is going to fly in and score 5 or 6 goals per game. Sometimes you need those types of games. I think they do have the skill set to do that, but that's just not the type of game that their team wants them to play. But when you're a checking team, and then the energy and the effort level is down, which we've seen at multiple times this season, then you're nothing. You don't have anything to fall back on. You have to, if you're going to decide to be a checking team, you have to bring it every single night in the energy factor to win games.
And this is part of the reason why I think I talked about it last week too, where I think the Kings are built to win these one-off games. They're built to win in, a March Madness style NFL playoff style tournament. I think to play this kind of relentless check first style in playoffs and do it in a 7-game series against a team that's probably better than you talent wise. That depends where they finish, of course. It depends on the matchup. This is where I continue to go back to, I don't believe that this is how you win in 2024. In playoffs, that is. Who knows? I don't. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe we'll find out in April, and it could be matchup dependent, right? Maybe they get a team that's a favorable matchup. I don't know if there's any team in the West right now that's scary. Look at that Western Conference. I don't know, Randon. Is there any team out there that, at least the way they're playing right now, like, listen, come playoff time, I still expect Colorado and Edmonton and Dallas and Vegas to be horses. But right now, I don't think any of them are playing at that level. So
I would say Edmonton, just only solely for PTSD.
Yeah, fair enough. But if you're the Kings, or if you're a Kings fan, I don't know if there's anybody in the West that you're scared to play right now. I guess to your point, Edmonton, I take that. But I have my questions and my concerns about stylistically that this is the way this can be successful in playoffs in this day and age. But right now, all we have to go on, at least for this particular season, is what they're doing in the regular season. And as that commenter said, there's buy-in and it's working.
I got also sentiment from what you said from a guy called Riceball, or at Tank Hank. They're a regular season team, not a playoff team. Recent season proof of that, likely turn out the same as the season. So some people are don't think anything's different, and we're just playing better. We do have a comment from a Canucks fan, Rob Son 92227127. So saying they're a very scrappy team. They don't take a shift off. You're very opportunistic, and they don't panic. They're still a very strong element of this team defense, and also taking chances on offensive breakouts when it makes sense. Now I just wish my team could implement this a little bit more. So getting a guy from Vancouver wishing they were a little bit more defensively sound. Has the defense kicked it up a notch with the 5-on-5 play, or has it just been more consistent? Are we getting better goaltending? Like, how do you?
I don't know that it's a whole lot different. Like if you were to look at, and I'll do that now as I'm kind of talking here, but like if you were to look at let's say their expected goals share from last year to this year, I don't know that it's drastically different. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything that's been much different in terms of, I shouldn't say it's clearly it's different in terms of stylistically and how they're doing it, because they're not playing that 1-3-1 system. So they're doing it in a different way from the neutral zone out, I guess. But I mean, again, if I just were to look at their expected goals against, so they were this season right now, they're 2.02 expected goals against per 60. And that's at 5-on-5. And I, off the top of my head, and I'm pulling it up now, I actually do think that is better than last season, but I don't think it's like a significant amount. So, because last year they were still one of the better teams in expected goals against. There was 2.29. So they were fourth in the NHL last year in expected goals against per 60. Right now they're second. So they're always good at this. This is what they've been good at for years. So I can understand people saying, well, so what's really different about this team? I get that. They're getting the same, they're doing a little bit different stylistically in terms of, like I said, through the neutral zone. But at the end of the day, this is the LA Kings. They're a check first, structure first, defensive first team. And it's exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah, we have at Lucky_Luke_20. He says it's a different version of the 1-3-1. Hiller disguised it so people wouldn't be upset about defensive hockey, but still not a ton of offense. The power play seems to help them, and the power play will still need to help them to be successful in the playoffs. So the sentiment is similar throughout the thread, where this team is just buying in more to the type of style that they've been asked to play. It's been more consistent buy-in. They wish this team could finish a little bit more on some of the odd man rushes or chances that they do get. Maybe there isn't much different other than consistency of play.
Yeah, I mean, their expected goals for per 60 is almost right in line with last year. 2.68 this year was 2.75 last year. So again, like it may look a little bit different in terms that they're being a little bit more aggressive and they're playing faster and they pushed up a little bit more. But at the end of the day, this is the LA Kings style. Like, this is the way they're going to play. It's their MO. They're going to tight check in the D zone. They're going to play that man on man in the D zone. So again, I don't think this is why people are like, a lot of those comments are saying, yeah, we've seen this before. They're good. This is what they do. So I don't know. Like, this is, I think the overall sentiment the vibe I'm getting from some of those comments is like, until we see something different in playoffs, what does it matter? We've seen this act before. Is the vibe I'm getting from some of those comments, and I get it, but you got to start somewhere, and they're really good at 5-on-5. I think the case can be made. We made this case on this show that it's time for something different stylistically. We're not really getting that. Like, it's different in the sense of they've changed from the 1-3-1, but this is still a check first, defensive first team. So again, I question whether or not that can be successful enough in playoffs. We're going to find out.
Definitely going to find out. Rod, 37S coming in with no overplayed players anymore, except for Byfield is not living up to his contract. Players are starting to buy in and follow the lead of Kopitar. Young kids of the past few years are now maturing. So the sentiment from, what we thought this team needed to be successful is getting some young kids. You're looking at LaFerriere having a good year this year, scoring. Over the last 6 games, he's third on the team in points. Shooting at 25%. He's got 3 goals. His IPP is around 66%. So he's for every time he's on ice, or anytime his team scores on ice, he's in that play 66% of the time. So he's creating a lot of that chances. Some of the other young players in the top 10 over the last 6 games, Alex Turcotte, 3 points. And every single time his team scores, the team scores while he's on the ice, he's involved in that play from that standpoint. So getting some young play there more consistently from the young guys. Obviously, my boy Brant Clark, while he's not on the stat sheet and still falling behind the pace that we need him to get that bold prediction, still playing great hockey there. So the young guns are being a little bit more consistent and coming up in when the team needs them.
Where would this team be without Laferriere right now? I mean, he's the only, I shouldn't say the only, but like what he's doing at 5-on-5. But we've talked about this team they're not scoring on the power play, right? And they have one guy in double-digit goals at 5-on-5, and it's Alex Laferriere. He leads the team in 5-on-5 scoring. Like for a team that is, and I just talked about during this 6-game winning streak, they're only averaging 2 5-on-5 goals a game. Like, where would this team be if Alex Laferriere wasn't scoring? Like, he's been a huge presence on this team.
Speaking of, get my boy Clarkey back on power play 1, please.
Yes.
Just throwing it out into the world.
Yes.
So then he goes on to say, it can fall apart. We all know that based on last year. But if it doesn't, we will be contending soon. So hopefully this team can be more consistent throughout it. He's saying that we do need more scoring, but the young kids are stepping up, which I tend to agree there. Patrick coming here with just goaltending, ... So Kemper's been playing some good hockey as of late. I'm gonna throw this here, and Rand 57.2 is saying Jim Hiller. So we talked about this, the making Fiala on the power play for both 1 and 2. Kind of shaking some things up there and, getting some lines to get hot at the right time. Whether you love him or you hate him, Jim Hiller is not afraid to make a move. Did some 11 and 7. So he's been turning some dials. What have you think of his coaching over the last 6 games? Has that been effective for the team?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's hard to complain when you look at how dominant this team is at 5-on-5. And I think, what's made his life maybe a little bit more difficult is like, listen, Quentin Byfield's not producing. We can talk about he's skating really fast and he's getting his chances and he's playing well. And, I can acknowledge that. But at some, like, we're past that. Like, he's got to produce. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that there was this idea, certainly from this podcast, that he was going to be among he's going to lead the team in scoring. That is not going to happen. And so I think there was also this idea that, Byfield's going to move back to center and he's going to start his evolution as to being, taking over as the top center in a couple of years. That ain't happening right now. And so I think Hiller, who recognized that, fairly early on, I guess, he's had to jumble some things around. He moved into the wing. He's now back at center, but he's really had to shuffle some things and try to figure out who works with who at this point and what's going to work. And so right now he's settled on, Byfield down in more of a third line role, I guess you would say. But that's right where he belongs right now. I'm sorry. Like I'm done with he's playing fine, right? He's involved, he's getting some chances, he's creating some chances, but at some point we have to get past this and he's got to start to produce like he's a top 6 player in the NHL.
Well, your sentiment has been echoed in the comments is bruh WTF 29 is saying I agree with all of this. He's answering, another person in the chat. He said the thing that gets me about 55 is how the media will try and pretend he's doing amazing by pointing out a cute deke he did at center ice in the second period. That's AHL stuff. At $6 million a year, he needs points. End of story! !
It's hard to argue that. Like, listen, I'm as much of a guy that is a process guy, right? I track shot passes and stuff like that because I believe in the process. And if you're doing things well, process wise, that eventually that stuff will come. But that said, Quentin Byfield's not in the top 5 in shot assists per 60. He's not in the top 5 or 6 in shot contributions per 60. So I don't know. Like, what we're seeing from him is what we saw from him a couple of years ago, where he looked the part. Like, he's skating, he's getting in on forechecks, he's involved in plays, but like when it comes time to actually make the play, it's falling apart. Like, there's something that's just off right now, where his feet are back to moving a million miles an hour and his hands and brain are catching up. So I don't know. I still am optimistic. I still think there's a talented player. We've seen it, but we're what are we, 33 games? What are we, Randon? How many games have the Kings played? Almost 30 games, 28 games this season, 29 games this season. Like,
the NHL is not a ribbon league. You don't get participation trophies.
Yeah, I'm like running out of time, and
yeah.
Whoever that was that made that comment about, they're showing highlights of a move he made in the second period. Like, yeah, that's we saw that when he was a young player coming up, and I think it was fine to point out then. At this point, it's like, oh, we really would like to see something at the end of that, I think.
Yeah, I'd like him to win a board battle and pass the puck to the middle of the ice that leads to a score. Like, that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I know. I like I said, this is all sounding harsh. I think it's deservedly so. That said, again, I don't know. I'm still optimistic. Like, I still believe that there's a player.
I believe in the player as well. And Oliver's coming in here he's also been extremely unlucky as far as the goal. He was in your class last week. If everybody took notes, the expected goals, share. He is one of the top players in the team to be snake bitten by
second lowest goal scored above expected. Yes.
Yeah. Goal scored above expected. Yeah. So, I mean, he has been kind of snake bitten there. So, not that that's an excuse, because good players find ways around that, and that changes. But hey, I mean, he could still go on a tear the second half of the season. Yep. And realistically, Joe, you're saying, hey, all that matters is April. If he gets hot and figures it out in March and is the type of player that we need in April, this team looks like they're going to make the playoffs regardless of his play right now. So if he can get hot at the right time and this team reaches that next level, we might have a place to turn it up there. So
yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly right. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And just to put it another way, he is 6th in individual expected goals on the Kings, and this is all situations. He's 22nd in goals scored above expected. I mean, so whether or not that's luck, bad luck, never been known as a great shooter. Like, I think there are some positives here, but man, do you got to start to see production.
And the last sentiment in a lot of them was just enjoy the ride. Like, why do we need to figure out? Just enjoy that the team's putting up points and enjoy watching hockey. And I think a lot of fans are just happy that the team is being a little bit more consistent there. So
yeah, no, and hey, why shouldn't you? Like, the Kings have been a team that, last year they had that horrible stretch from December through February. Then they got trounced again in the playoffs by Edmonton for the 3rd straight year. So there's been some misery, dating back to for like the last 12 months, you could say, for the Kings. So they're on a great stretch right now, as you should as a fan, and enjoy the hell out of it, because it's going well. So why not?
It's funny. It's kind of like when you watch those movies that are just meant just that are just meant to be like action movies or whatever, and you're watching it, and then somebody's like, man, this dialogue is really horrible, or like what about this plot hole? What about this plot hole? And I'm just like, man, did you not see like the big 1,000-foot like machines battling dragons, battling this? Like, this movie is just meant to enjoy. You're meant to watch it and just enjoy it, like, not point out how bad the dialogue is. And aren't you fun at parties? That type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, why don't we just enjoy that they're putting up points? They're in 2nd in the Pacific. I think they're top 4 in the Western Conference. I think this team, though, it's like every fan, until you clear that next hurdle, then you always wait until you wait until the shoe falls.
You're waiting for that other shoe to drop. Yeah, I get it.
Speaking of other things dropping, is you could potentially drop in those ticket prices here with our next sponsor at Game Time. So Game Time is where you're getting those good deals. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, like when I go to a game, man, where can I find the best seat, best deal? And Game Time helps you do that. Filters out all the fluff and shows you just the incredible deals on great seats, so you have to waste your time searching through thousands of different tickets. And I'm looking at it here and I'm like, man, where do I need to find the best seats? Well, you can curate your app to make them easier, or to make it easier to find the best price with a great seat. Super deal. You could view the seats before you buy, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection. Game Time's got it all. So you might think, like, hey, Rain, like, is this any different? Well, Game Time's got it all in one spot. So all in pricing. So the last thing you want to do is try to find a seat, and then you're looking at it, and then boom, hit without a $100 fee here, $100 fee there, and all of a sudden your ticket prices are triple what you're looking at. Seat views, you get a panoramic seat view. Hey, right now the Kings are on the road. Maybe you've never been to that arena and you want to see what your tickets are going to look like. Get a panoramic view of the seat before you buy. Lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage, it allows you to have the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Now, we can take the guesswork out here, but with using Game Time. So download the Game Time app now, create an account, use code THPN for 20% off your first purchase. And again, like, that's when you download the app. You don't have to enter this code in at checkout. So if you want to download the app, put THPN in there, and then maybe buy some tickets later on, use that code now. Get that $20 stored away. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code THPN for 20% off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. You know what time it is now, Joe? Boom! It's tinfoil hat time, boys.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, my favorite. And one of the big ones coming over the wire there. One of them was already debunked, and that was the Fox from New York. But I wouldn't be surprised if New York makes a little bit more moves there. But the Chuck. And I know fans don't want that name is whispered in hushed tones and in hated hallways. But his brother was traded away out of Calgary, and now Brady is potentially up for grabs out of Ottawa. Me personally, I think that this is the exact type of player that the Kings need. They need a elite top scoring winger. Boom, check there. Over 30 goals pretty much every season over the last 4 years. That fits the type of player that the Kings like. Rough and tumble, not afraid to mix it up, throw the hits, throw the body. Do that as well as top production. And his no movement clause kicks in next year. So would Ottawa maybe try to get a haul in return? Do the Kings have enough to can be considered a haul? Is Tkachuk kind of forcing his way out of there? All of those yet to be determined. But I think he's the perfect player for this team. And honestly, I think that with the way this team plays 5-on-5, and then you add an elite scoring winger, I would say this team would be able to, potentially win a series and contend for the cup if this team gets on.
I mean, yes, in the sense that he'd be a hell of an add to the team. There's been a lot of smoke around Ottawa and Brady Tkachuk for the last, honestly, season or two, I feel like. And I don't know where I'm sure it's starting somewhere. That fire is somewhere. Maybe it's in New York City. They're the ones that really started that fire, or at least poured some gas on it over the last week with the report that Larry Brooks had about the Rangers are really targeting Brady Tkachuk. Ottawa has been pretty quick to dispute that. They say no. Brady Tkachuk has said he's not looking to go anywhere. I'm at the point where, like, I don't see Ottawa making this move. I don't see the need I just don't see the desire for Ottawa to do this. He's their captain. You've just rattled off why he's such an important piece to their team. Now, where it could get interesting is if Brady Tkachuk says, listen, I've been patient with you guys. We have not put a winning team together. I would like to move on. Unless he says that, I don't see where he's going, and I don't know. So I'm certainly going to say I'm pretty skeptical that Brady Tkachuk gets dealt. Stranger things have happened, but while I think
Weren't we all skeptical of his brother being dealt, and that happened?
Well, no, because it was a totally different situation. Like he was going into the final year of his deal, right? So he had 1 year left. So the team had to decide he wasn't going to resign. We've got to trade him. So this is not the same situation. Brady Tkachuk is under contract for 3 more years after this. There's no concern. He ain't going anywhere. So it's not as if he's out of a contract like his brother was. So it is a different situation. So I'll believe it when I see it.
It's the last chance for them to move him unencumbered.
I just don't know why they want to. Right? I mean,
he doesn't have 3 more. Yeah, he does. Yeah, 3 more years. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do they want to? Why he's their captain? He's the face of the franchise. He's, I presumably an integral part of their, like, I know we could say, well, the Rangers just traded their captain. I think it's different. I mean, they're totally different. I mean, Tkachuk is 25 years old. I don't get it. I don't see why they're itching to move him.
I just don't think it would be Ottawa's that wants to move him, but if Brady's giving him no chance, like he's in his prime,
he would be the one that has to initiate that and has to say, okay, I've put up with this long enough. We're not making the strides that I thought we would make. We need to move on. And again, I look at this team. What? I don't get it. Stützle, Tkachuk, Norris, Giroux, Batherson, Pinto, Ridley Gregg in your bottom 6. Their D that has Sanderson, Shabbat. Like, I don't think they should have got rid of Chychrun personally, but this team is not this bad.
With all that, they're a 500 team.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I certainly don't think Ottawa is looking to trade him at all. Maybe if Tkachuk gets to a point where he's had enough and he wants a new start because it's not happening in Ottawa. Hey, if that happens, that happens. But I don't know. Like I'm not a buyer in that. I think he's a great player, but
we're here to throw around trade scenarios because that's what everybody likes. So what would it take if it were available? What would it take, you think, to get a player like Brady?
Oh, geez,
Byfield in 1. Would the Kings even do that? Alex Turcotte, more in a 1. Because Ottawa's not probably looking for just solely prospects, so you'd have to throw in a player.
Right,
so you'd have to throw salary in to make the salary work on the other end. Brady's making $8 million. Right?
Is Ottawa in this trade? Are they like rebuilding? Are they looking to just kind of retool some things? Like,
I'm guessing they probably would retool because the rest of the roster says they want to compete, right? So if it's just Brady that wants out, and they want a player coming the other way, similar to how Calgary got Huberdeau.
Yeah,
like it would have to be something like that. So is it Fiala? Is it like Fiala for Brady? I mean, it's just star for star, and you get a guy that is younger and making the same amount of money? Or is it Green Tree, a first, and Trevor Moore, to where they're getting a prospect in a first and they're kind of not like punting it down the line, but they're getting more young talent? Is it Trevor Moore for the money, a 1, and maybe another young prospect like Jordan Spence?
I wouldn't even know where to begin, but you're probably right in some of these names that you're mentioning, whether it's Turcotte or Byfield or Jordan Spence. But if you're Ottawa, does any of that make you better? Like, are you doing it? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know that Ottawa does any of those.
Well, I mean, at this point, if this trade scenario is Brady's forcing their hand, okay. Now the team could just say, F off. We have you for 3 more years. Good luck.
Yeah,
or whatever. But his no movement clauses kick in next year. So if they were to have more avenues to trade a player and get a return of a caliber that they want or can expect, it would be this year. So would it be, do you move Byfield back to center and have Byfield and Turcotte playing and trade Danault? Does Danault help Ottawa that way, or is it?
I think it would have to be. I mean, it has to be a Turcotte, Jordan Spence. I wouldn't be shocked if they wanted Brant Clark, Quentin Byfield. Like, these are the teams, if you're Ottawa, you're going to be asking for. These are the players you're going to be asking for. I don't know that LA, like, I don't think LA trades Byfield. If they were to trade Spence and or Turcotte, does that work for Ottawa? I don't know.
I mean, Turcotte right now has proven that he's a National League hockey player, like consistent player. You get Trevor Moore to make the salary work, and a 1 on top of that. Is that enough to get it done? Or maybe another prospect that is on the fringe that maybe you could bring, like a Samuel Hellenius has shown that he can play. Is he the type of player that, like, young prospect that they could put on the fourth line and get him consistent ice time? Like, is it that kind of talent? I know you're getting rid of a first liner for a bunch of middle to late nines, but
I
Washington
guess
seems to be winning with a bunch of pieces that don't make sense. Like, is it just not working? I mean,
I think if you were to look at, the star for star thing is interesting, because you had with Matthew Tkachuk, the Jonathan Huberdeau situation. That's interesting, and the Fiala would match that.
I think Fiala could play with a guy like Tim Stützle.
I mean, that's a if you're just spitballing, that's a pretty interesting, like, concept of a trade.
That's what this hat is for.
It is. I know. I know. I don't have one, but I can see where it goes. And yeah, as John mentions, Fiala's got a no trade clause, so I'd be surprised if he went to Ottawa. But I like, if you're taking out the star for star thing and you're looking at a package, Jack Eichel a couple years back got, what was it? It was Peyton Krebs, Alex Tuck, so a top prospect, an NHLer, a first round pick, and I think there was a fourth piece in there. So a first round pick, a high prospect, I guess we'll call it Liam Greentree, and an NHL player, Trevor Moore, because of money, I guess.
Yeah.
But you probably need, you're going to need a fourth piece as Jordan Spence. Like, now, are we talking a Spence first, Greentree, and Moore? Is that a deal? I don't know. Like, that's probably what something that you're looking like, that Ottawa's going to need some sort of a haul to get a deal like that done for a guy who's in his mid-20s, who signed for 3 more years.
And is their captain, right?
And is their captain.
So, I think, it's something that the Kings are still looking for their captain in the future. Would Brady be that guy for the Kings? Like a young player that they can rally behind for a long time?
I mean, your idea that Brady Tkachuk is like a perfect fit for the Kings, you could probably say that for all 32 teams. Like, he's that type of player.
He's a unicorn, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, other than his brother.
Yeah, he's that type of a player that I think any team would be better by adding, which makes it really difficult. There would have to be a falling out between he and the organization, a la Jack Eichel in Buffalo. Like, I don't know. Like, it's delicate, because it's a lot easier for Matthew Tkachuk to say, I'm not going to re-sign here in Calgary, right? Yeah. As his contract is coming to an end, where for Tkachuk as the captain of the team to say, I'm out, with 3 years left on his deal.
And you think, if you're Ottawa, you're like, okay, well, then I have 2 more years to repair this, whatever I did that makes him want to leave. Right. And then if worse comes to worse, a guy who wants out is going to waive his no trade clause to get out of there. Right. I just think, it's exactly what Kings need. A top scoring winger. He's the type of player that the Kings like, as far as his attitude, the way he approaches the game, the physicality. As much as the rivalry has been there with Calgary and his brother, I've always admired the way the Tkachuks play, and it would just be nice to have him on the roster. And we'll finally get to see 2 play with each other when they play for Team USA in February.
Yeah.
Johnny comes in here with his trade idea: Trevor Lewis for Brady Tkachuk straight up.
They can do it.
Get enough to get it done there.
That might do it.
So John coming in here, imagine Tkachuk and Kempe on the same line together. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice there. So something to look out for, and whether it's the Kings or another team in the league, I think Brady is a unicorn type player, an elite type player that any team would need. Whether the Ottawa wants to sell or maybe they want to turn into buyers and get more pieces around their young star remains to be seen. But the Rangers have already dealt somebody, and according to Oliver right here is saying that Larry Brooks and Spitting Chicklets just put out a segment today saying that Fox is on the table. So he's off the table, he's on the table, he's around the table, he's eating dinner. We don't know what he's doing there, Joe, but former Norris winner, not playing as well this year. I don't know if that's just because New York is not playing as well, but still an elite upper level defenseman. What kind of move would this be for the Kings? Obviously, we have a lot of right shot and that right left. So does that really fit where the Kings would need? Would it be if the Rangers are tearing it up for a rebuild, or the Rangers not a rebuilding team, they're going to have to do some sort of retool, so they would need an NHL level player in return? Like where do you think an Adam Fox type deal would end up?
It ain't happening. The segment on Chicklets I listened to today with Brooks, Larry Brooks said, would I make Adam Fox available and on the table? Of course. He said he would. He in his opinion, he would have anybody that's not tied to a no movement clause as somebody that he would consider being available. I don't know if that means that the Rangers actually think that, considering he's Adam Fox and is like their cornerstone defense player. No, I don't think Adam Fox is going anywhere. And I think obviously if he were available, you jump at that opportunity if you're the Kings. So like they're going to want Brant Clark. Are you trading Brant Clark for Adam Fox?
My heart would break in half, but
I
would understand it.
That's the thing is Adam Fox is, I mean, again, stranger things have happened, but Adam Fox is not getting traded. I don't think that that's real. So no,
just flat out no, huh?
No, I mean, I think if you're the Rangers, you're trying to. That leaves just a massive hole on your blue line. So I think that you're trying to find ways, to find a centerman, because Zibanejad has been horrible, and that's a big problem. But I don't think that trading Adam Fox is the answer.
Into the answer to that.
No.
Ralph coming in here a little bit earlier in the chat. Will we do anything at the trade deadline this year? I get so pumped every year for no reason. Now, we're still not in February, so who knows what this team looks like at that point. The trade rumors, either positive or buying or selling, always get hyped up when the team is doing really well or is doing super poorly. Is this team? Obviously, we're going to get an addition by getting off the injury reserve, like we did a little bit last year with Victor Arvidsson, with Drew Doughty. But is there some of the teams that are maybe faltering? Is there a player that you're kind of maybe eyeing or would pop in your head that might be a good addition for this roster?
Boy, that's interesting, because there's a lot of different ways to go. So I saw somebody in the chat mention Nashville. That's been a really disappointing team this year. I don't know if there's anybody right now that I'm necessarily targeting on that team. I would say if there's one, Luke Evangelista is a young player. He's 22 years old. He's on an entry-level deal, who's not playing, like he's been in and out of that lineup. He's a right shot player, right shot forward, who I think can play in your middle six. I think that's a player if Nashville was willing to move off of him. Again, he's a guy at an ELC, so there's still really, or maybe not his ELC, but he's on one of his first contracts. So he's a really young player. But again, he's not. I don't know if he's fallen out of favor, but he's certainly not playing regularly, if I recall. So he's somebody that I would certainly be poking around if I was the Kings, looking at Nashville. I don't know what Buffalo does and what they're going to do. I mentioned Dylan Cousins' name earlier. Talk about a guy that the Kings could really use stylistically. That would be an interesting ad. He's not quite to the level of Brady Tkachuk, but Cousins is a guy that plays the game hard. Again, another right shot. He can play the center. He can play the wing. I think his contract is okay, although he's not having a great season this year at $7.1 million for the next 4 or 5 years. But at 23 years old, there's a lot of runway there for him to be a really nice player. I don't know what Buffalo's doing though right now. Like I don't think that market is ready for another rebuild. So I don't know where they're doing. They may sit tight. I don't think they're going to make a trade quite like that big. But if Buffalo were to sell or look to do a shakeup, that's somebody that I'm very interested in. Those are a couple of names that kind of come to mind because I think we're still a little early. I don't know what teams are going to outright sell. I don't know if there's anybody really on Pittsburgh, although the Kings could use, I guess at this point, a fourth line center, maybe Blake Lizotte, maybe bring him back.
Oh, come on. The mosquito, the gnat.
Hey,
I think it's early, and then we're gonna have a lot more of these tinfoil hat segments and trades. I think obviously the Kings fans love it. I love it. We talked about Chikrin for 2.5 years, and it never got old, at least for us. So we're gonna continue doing that this year. I think a guy like Tkachuk, when that smoke happens, you listen, and I think it's a type of player that you almost give up anything for to get him. I don't think any player's off the table for a guy like Tkachuk at that point. Will the Kings be willing to do that? Who knows? Will Ottawa be willing to do that? Who knows? But be interesting to see. The deadline's still far, far away. We don't even know what this Kings team is going to look like there. Hopefully, if they keep playing like this, they're at top of the Pacific, and we do know that we need to go in and use that first for an ad. So, Joe, man, we got plenty of more discussions and talks ahead about Pacific players, and as teams start falling out, we're gonna have more and more of an idea. Johnny Vampatna is saying, missing cap friendly right now. I've been really enjoying Puckpedia. It's a really nice little website. The structure is really good. So
there's another one. So you mentioned Puckpedia, which is good. I'm the one that I've been going to a lot more recently is a site called The Stanley Cap, thestanleycap.com. It is clean, very neat, very clean. It's still it's new and they're kind of working through some things. So there's still a ways to go, but I would highly recommend folks checking out the Stanley Cap. I think that's been an excellent site as well. Cap friendly was as good as it gets. So, have a different level of expectation right now as all of these sites are going to work to kind of gear up to get to maybe what those were. But I'm not familiar with cap wages. I see John J M22 mentioned that. I'm not familiar with it, so I guess I'll have to check that one out. But Puckpedia has been fine, and the Stanley Cap has been excellent in my opinion.
Hashtag not a sponsor, will be a sponsor if they want us to be. But I just like some of the twerks here, and I haven't been to the other two, so maybe they have it as well. But I like the draft pick summary is a cool thing. What picks do they have, and then they have their own assigned value for what the picks value are. So what are the value of this year's draft for your franchise or the franchise that you're looking at?
I like that.
They have a full roster breakdown. They have how they acquired all the picks. Like, so what player was traded for? So you're looking like, oh, the Preds have 3 first-rounders this year in the 2025 draft. They acquired one from Vegas. They acquired one from Tampa Bay. How they acquired that? What was the full trade in order to get that? So I like that full breakdown as a roster thing. They have the overview of the team. They have little snippets from Puckpedia and other resources on X, what free agents they have coming up. So I kind of like the way the setup is. So,
for sure.
you know, it's going to be something that we're going to be using a lot more as the season's going on. And we're going to be needing a lot more of you fans to help with that and join in on those tinfoil hats. So hit that like button on the way out. As you're watching the games this week, go read some of the articles over at hockeyroyalty.com. Articles coming out all the time, not only about the Kings, but the Reign and our prospect pool. So always good reads there. Follow us on X and on what's that new one? Blue Skies? Is that what
Blue
it is?
Sky.
Blue Sky. We're over there as well, if whatever you guys prefer. And then, you know, follow us each individually. Again, hit that like button on the way out, and we really appreciate you guys coming in here tonight and enjoying some Kings hockey. Big game tomorrow, Joe, against the Devils. Let's keep this train rolling. And as always on this podcast, go Kings, go.